Welcome to the latest SIGA and Soccerex webinar series, a collaboration between SIGA, the world's leading organisation for sports integrity, and Soccerex, the premier platform for football business to network and learn. This second episode of the series, No Such Thing as a Crisis, focuses on the topic of the moment, the proposed European Super League, and explores why such a proposal should not be seen as the end of change, but taken as an opportunity to start new governance reforms. Moderated by Miguel Delaney, chief football writer at The Independent, tune in to watch our guest speakers cut to the heart of the issues surrounding a topic that has generated more passion and interest for the game away from the pitch than any other. Today's panel includes Emmanuel Marcedo de Medeiros, Global CEO of SIGA and founder and former CEO the European Leagues and World League Association. Sir David Richards, co-founder and former chairman the Premier League, former SVP, the FA, co-founder and former chairman, European Leagues and World League Association, former chairman of the UEFA Professional Football Committee. The Right Honourable Richard Caborn, former Minister of Sport, United Kingdom. With special participation from Javier Tebas, President of La Liga, board member, European Leagues and member, UEFA Executive Committee. Miguel, over to you.
Hello,
welcome to the latest SIGA.
Sorry, just interference there. Hello and welcome to the second episode of the SIGA and Soccerex webinar series, where we again dissect the fallout of the European Super League. I'm your host, Miguel Delaney. So before we get to our stellar group of speakers, we have exclusive footage with La Liga president Javier Tebas on the Super League and his opinions on all the drama. So we first asked Javier, were the plans to him a surprise, and was it in response to the sustainability problems facing European football?
Bueno, se ha presentado ahora, pero hay que pensar que la amenaza de la Superliga es un tema que lleva 20 o 25 años encima de la mesa, ¿no? Mire, más recientemente, en el año 2019, había una reforma que quiso hacer la UEFA y la ECA de la competición de Champions, que era una especie de Superliga, que hacían dos categorías, pero prácticamente 20 clubes quedaban siempre en la categoría primera. Siempre es un tema que se ha planteado y bueno, ahora pues yo creo que han intentado buscar un momento como excusa de la crisis por el COVID para que creían que estratégicamente era el momento, ¿no? Pero no responde a una demanda real del fútbol, no responde a una solución real que necesita el fútbol actual, responde a una política más bien egoísta de los grandes clubes de Europa, ¿no?
Next, we delved into Mr. Tebas' views on the Super League and the changes of competition structure.
Bueno, yo creo que la gente que estaba detrás de la Superliga, en el caso del presidente del Real Madrid, Florentino Pérez, o Glazer del Manchester United, no valoran, no están de lo que supone el fútbol doméstico, las competiciones nacionales, la meritocracia en el mundo del fútbol. No se puede cambiar una tradición, una historia de que ha nacido el fútbol así, de la meritocracia para conseguir los retos deportivos, ¿no? El sueño deportivo no es un tema que se pueda eliminar de la noche a la mañana en el fútbol europeo. Bueno, yo creo que es imposible, ¿no? Los retos como el Leicester, como el Atalanta ahora en Italia, ¿no? No se pueden borrar de que exista, que es parte de la vida del fútbol, ¿no? Y han minusvalorado mucho esa cuestión y todo lo que genera alrededor, ¿no? Se tendrían que preguntar por qué todas las grandes ligas ni en 24 horas estábamos en contra, por qué las grandes federaciones estaban en contra, por qué las organizaciones de ligas menores estaban en contra. Era evidente que porque era un proyecto totalmente muy peligroso para el fútbol mundial, ya no solo europeo, ¿no?
We next asked, what's the impact of the European Super League on the whole football ecosystem? In particular, how would it have impacted Spanish football?
Bueno, el impacto, primero, que se rompen los sueños de cualquier tipo de club de llegar al máximo de la cúspide, y luego también que a nivel del ecosistema del fútbol europeo económico se hubiese destrozado, ¿no? Porque la Superliga lo único que pretendía, todo aquel dinero que se generan de derechos audiovisuales en las ligas europeas, se trasvasase a los grandes clubes. Ese era el objetivo y lo que se podía haber producido. Si se llegase a producir, hay que pensar, y nosotros hemos hecho los cálculos en España, pero serán muy similares al resto de países de Europa, sobre todo los grandes países de Europa. Hay que pensar, nosotros hubiésemos bajado del 1,37% del PIB que somos en España, al 0,80% del PIB. De los más de 160.000 puestos de trabajo que se genera el fútbol profesional en España, directo, indirecto e inducido, se hubiesen perdido cerca de 50.000 puestos de trabajo, ¿no? El valor propio de los clubes, de inversores que hemos tenido, al bajar de esta forma tan drástica los ingresos audiovisuales, bajaría el ticketing, bajarían los ingresos comerciales de patrocinios también, perderían mucho más de la mitad de su valor. Bueno, de triunfar hubiese sido una catástrofe para el entorno económico del fútbol europeo. Por eso, no era verdad que cuando decían no afecta a las ligas, nosotros o mentían o desconocen la industria del fútbol en Europa. Por lo tanto, me da lo mismo, los efectos al final es lo mismo, ¿no? Era un desastre para el fútbol europeo.
The news came as a shock to everyone. So how did Mr. Tebas receive the news?
Bueno, realmente solo con leer la nota del primer día te lo dice todo, ¿no? Ellos daban por creada la Superliga, daban creada por la competición, que empezarían lo antes posible y que instaban a UEFA y a FIFA a tener reuniones para ver cómo era el acomodo de la Superliga dentro de estas organizaciones, ¿no? Sobre todo con UEFA, ¿no? Que yo las diferenciaría. Con UEFA era la desaparición de la Champions, una competición excelente que tenemos que hay en Europa y que se dedica también a una labor de distribuir dinero por el resto de países de Europa, ¿no? Hubiese sido la destrucción de lo que es el sistema que nos hemos dado en el fútbol europeo, ¿no?
So a key question is whether the European Super League would have damaged UEFA and FIFA competitions.
Hombre, la de UEFA la veo muy clara y sabiendo claramente cuál es el riesgo que conlleva para el ecosistema del fútbol europeo. FIFA no. FIFA formalmente sí que constantemente dicen no estamos a favor, pero también en esos mensajes hablan de hay que oír las ideas, hablan de sentarse, de dialogar. Bueno, cuando te han intentado hacer un golpe de Estado hace 3 semanas es difícil que te sientes con dialogar quien te ha querido ver, entre comillas, muerto, ¿no? Yo creo que son bastante tibios en estos momentos donde se necesitarían bastante más firmeza, ¿no?
Put rather simply now, is the Super League finished?
Bueno, vamos a ver la evolución de los acontecimientos, ¿no? Yo creo que la Superliga como tal proyecto está muerto. Me preocupa mucho más esta postura tan tibia de FIFA, o ya no tibia, somos conocedores que Infantino y su equipo han tenido reuniones y tienen reuniones con los clubes de la Superliga, sobre todo con los 3 que han quedado, hablan con ellos y me preocupa muchísimo, ¿no? Y que hablen de cambios de calendario, hablen de... Todo se basa siempre en modificar las ligas nacionales, ¿no? ¿Por qué no dejan de haber tantas competiciones internacionales que ellos van creando constantemente y dejan de tocar las ligas domésticas, que somos el motor auténtico del fútbol mundial, ¿no?
Actually, is that with the league? They want more.
No, lo que están planteando es más competición, más partidos para quitárselos a las ligas domésticas, ¿no? Para que el dinero fluya solo para los grandes clubes y esta organización, en este caso como sería la FIFA con el Mundial de Clubes, ¿no? Es evidente que todo lo que están planteando es imposible, no cabe en el calendario, todos los nuevos partidos que se están planteando y nuevas competiciones. Solo las pueden hacer si las ligas nacionales reducen, que es el discurso que ahora vienen diciendo y que estamos oyendo, y desde luego yo hablo por la Liga Española, no van a reducir la Liga Española a 20 clubes.
Well, no doubt that these words from Javier Tebas, a man who has a long experience in European international football, are strong. And no doubt that they will cause an impact. I would dare to say that they are like a big rock falling on a lake. And we have with us also senior executives in world football and in global policy, who also have strong views about what's happening in the European arena, the causes, the symptoms, the consequences, what's even behind the scenes of this breakaway league. Certainly not the first time that we are confronted with threats of this magnitude, but never so visible, never so confrontational, never so in the open air. And I think that was a big change. The results and the consequences that we have seen 48 hours after, I think were eloquent. They have shown where the fans lie, what was the position of the global community and the whole football system, but there are many lessons to be extracted, and there are also many issues to be dealt with, because what the European football and the European sport and the world sport is experiencing cannot be just confined to competition formats, distribution models, and access lists. But Miguel, maybe I took the floor without being my turn, but being also from the Iberian Peninsula and having hot blood like Javier Tebas, I could not resist commenting what he just said.
Sorry about that. A slight technical issue. Maybe not quite the disruption that the European Super League would have caused. But I mean, I suppose that just to kind of kick off the discussion and to frame it really, I suppose it's worth stepping back a bit and looking at it in its whole. What does the panel think the consequences of the launch and the very quick demise of the European Super League would have been? So maybe we'll start with Sir David.
First of all, I don't think it's gone away, because going back to 2005 in my day, and Richard Caban was instrumental because we had to take it to Europe. I think you've got to look at what's really involved in this. The clubs are after more money, but it's about competitions, isn't it? And I don't think we really got to the bottom of how the Super League would work, because it was all thrown up and, oh, it's a brand new Super League. How many games are they going to play? Where they're going to play? None of that came out. So I think you've got to look into it in great detail. But for England, it's caused major problems because we've got a government that are very proactive within the game. And they're now talking about a regulator. And Richard can answer this question in great detail. They're talking about a regulator. They're talking about fans on the board. You know, we've got 20 clubs that basically belong to entrepreneurial billionaires. And I think once we start talking to them like this, they say, okay, you can have the club. It's X millions. Who's going to buy it? What's going to happen to them games then? What's going to happen to the fans? You've got to be so careful. In England, we are so regulated with different parts, with VAT, with PAYE. We are regulated to the hilt. And the league is managed extremely well. The failure on this part was that nobody knew what was happening. Because if the Premier League had really known, the board would have done something about it. But I don't think they really knew. I'm not certain, but it's just an instinct that I've got. But Richard, go back to 2005 when Nellie Kroes had us in her office and she was talking to us about what it really means to have a regulator. Listen to this, Miguel.
Well, yeah, I think Miguel as well. I think we set off with the fact that English football was being threatened in terms of its structure. And English football is not just the Premier League. English football is 2 million young people playing football in football clubs in the pyramid. Now, we've talked a lot about the pyramid, and I don't think people really understand the importance of the pyramid, the structure, not just of football, but indeed of wider sport across Europe, and how we are able to use sport to drive many agendas: social inclusion, education, a whole series of agendas that are driven by sport. So what we are talking about here, which I think is very important indeed, is how we not only maintain, but enhance the pyramid structure and make sure it can't be threatened by 6 clubs, as far as England's concerned, and 14 clubs. And as Dave was saying, we had this in 2005 on my watch as the sports minister in the UK. And there was the potential breakaway at that time And we took steps as ministers of sport across the European Union, and in Liverpool, as it was, we had a sports ministers meeting there, and we decided to set up a review, which we did, well, the Arnold report, as they call it, and that laid out a whole series of steps and strengthened the licensing system that is used by UEFA as well. And that's something I think we can come back to see how we can control the power of these clubs. But it was that concern back in 2005 that started us to actually look at the structure of football at the European level, and also obviously at domestic level as well. And that is why, as Dave was saying, we've got an incredibly successful league in the Premier League. We've got very successful in terms of our football structure, and I think it stands probably second to none to any across Europe. And we're not going to have that destroyed by greed on the one hand, and then the consequence of that greed breaking up the system. And at the heart of that, at the very heart of that, is the ability to be able to generate such huge amounts of money through television rights, which are totally and utterly unregulated. And going back to the very point that Sir Dave has just said, Nelly Kroes, when we met her as the European Commissioner on competition, she said, Minister, the fans are getting a bad deal. And that's why we're insisting on the Premier League actually curtailing its powers, and she wants to break the whole lot up. And also UEFA at the time as well had to change many of their structures to abide by somehow the constraints that were brought out by the European Union at that time. And indeed, it was broke up to 6 modules for the Premier League, as Dave knows, and indeed the clubs know as well. But what it did not do, was actually regulate in any way the monopoly, the cartel that is operated by 20 clubs who sell their rights, unlike any other part of business in the UK. Any utility that is a natural monopoly is regulated. And the Premier League, in selling the rights of 20 clubs television, both domestically and internationally, is totally and utterly unregulated. And that is why the power of the Premier League through the owners is actually so potent, because of that ability to do that. And that, I think, is an area now that's going to be looked at very, very seriously, of how that power is actually contained by legislation and a regulator, or is going to be that by change of governance and internal regulation of the footballing authorities in England, i.e. the FA. And that, I think, is the problem that we're facing. And whilst I understand the fans, who go there week in and week out on them terraces, they want more power, but also they want answers to the question of the one that's been raised, is this going to happen again? And I think we've got to make sure it doesn't happen again.
From the way you're both talking as well, it feels like England is a bit of a touchstone and a reflection of bigger issues across European football and right at the top of UEFA. I mean, you probably have a wider perspective of that, Emmanuel. What do you think of what you've said?
Well, I think, first of all, we need to be crystal clear. There were important things said from the breakaway clubs to justify their actions. There were important reactions. Harsh words, heavy words were used to qualify this initiative by the UEFA president. We have just listened to Javier Tebas expressing also his dissatisfaction with what he called a greedy, propelled initiative, and others, including myself, have already used the same words. But we need to extract consequences. And I think we need to see this point by point. The president of Real Madrid, an esteemed gentleman who leads an historical club, said that they were forced to do this, and I quote, to save football, because football was facing massive financial losses and clubs needed more money. I ask Senor Florentino Pérez, how did clubs like Real Madrid got here? Was it because of the global pandemic? Was the global pandemic and the consequent drop of revenues that pushed them to the financial abyss? Is the global pandemic the reason why Real Madrid showed at the end of 2020 a gap of 1 billion euros? Was anyone holding a gun to the chairmen, the owners, and the executives of the clubs who overspend year after year, despite the red lights, despite the alarms, despite the warnings, inflating the transfer market, inflating transfer fees, creating an artificial bubble? And we all said that one day that bubble would burst and there would be crisis. So no one can clean their hands on the wall. Everyone has responsibility. Those who run the club, excuse me, I will get to the government, Richard. I will get to the government because the governments are not exempted from responsibility.
Why didn't
I will get there. I will get there.
Why didn't we have financial fair play?
Do you want to just let Emmanuel finish, and then we'll come to you?
No, but I'm just asking because I think it's important to the listeners to say.
I will leave no rock unturned, Richard, because this is the moment of truth, and it's time that we have this conversation all face to face.
Well, I'd like to.
There has been navel gazing attitude. There has been denial. There has been pressure from the fans year after year, and we can discuss culturally what it means. I can speak on behalf of my own country, and the pressure that has been exerted over those who run the clubs year after year, and the reason behind the financial collapse of clubs in my country and many others. So no one is exempted from responsibilities. The first step to find solutions is to be honest with ourselves and recognize that things could have been better. Even club licensing and financial fair play at national level in many leagues are just cosmetic measures. They don't go deep. And now we are discussing clubs being in financial distress, but they have been walking towards the abyss for many years. We have seen that. And so this has to be acknowledged. This has to be acknowledged. Now, beyond the European Super League, and I think it was something that could have been avoided. It should have been avoided because it was clear that it was against the fans' wishes, and the fans are the consumers. They have the legitimacy, but they also have the financial power that fuels all the business. It was against the law. It was against EU law, first and foremost. A close competition is against EU law, and it was a nonsense in all respects. There was no financial solidarity vertically to lower clubs, and this is something that needs to be equally addressed. But beyond the European Super League and its ramifications and shockwaves and power struggles, who are far from finished, I ask, over the last 10, 15, 20 years, since 2006, the Arnault report that you mentioned, Richard, have we solved the issues and the challenges regarding the players' transfer markets? Have we dealt with the club ownership investments, offshore vehicles, with the threat of money laundering ever present, with criminal infiltration like wildfire? I don't think we have. So this is a great opportunity to put everything on the table, to have a positive and constructive discussion, and once and for all, focus on the solutions that people demand to continue to invest their trust, and the business community the same.
Did one of you want to pick up on that before we? Sir David.
Miguel, Emmanuel. First of all, since 2005, if you look at the Premier League 20 clubs records, you'll see that very few of them have lost money. This last 10 years, every club has made a profit. The redistribution of that wealth is amazing
I was not referring to the Premier League, just to be clear.
But the Premier League had 6 clubs that were in this. And first of all, we don't really know what the Super League, all we got is they're going to form a Super League and they're going to play games. Now, England, the Big 6, have always been chasing Barcelona. They could never, ever keep up with the revenues that Barcelona got. So there were a lot of problems with players. And it's been a problem for a long, long time. Now, the debt that's in Spain, there's not that kind of debt in the UK. It wouldn't be allowed. There used to be until in 2004, 2005, 2006, we started to get hold of it and say, we're not going to allow this kind of money to be put to players and agents. And we've actually conceded and kept up with Spain because Spain's been paying phenomenal bloody money and wages and transfer fees. England have tried to keep up with it. This year, there's only one club in the league that's lost money. One club. All the rest of them have said. Now,
but England, in many cases, English football and the Premier League is an oasis compared to the rest of the world.
Yeah, but you know,
you are broadcasted in 219 countries.
You know, you and me worked extremely hard for 12 years in Europe trying to get the same kind of regulations into European football that we've got in the UK. England were trying to set the scene. You and me ran with that torch for many years.
Exactly.
But it was always difficult. It was always difficult with Spain, always. You know, and I think what's happened here, we've heard this word about it's a Super League, and everybody's joined it and said it'll destroy football. We don't know enough about the internal workings and what was going to happen. Me and Richard know some about the past, but what's happened, it's been blown up. The big mistake that England made is the 6 clubs did not go to the Premier League and tell the Premier League board, we're going to discuss this. This is what we're going to discuss. This is how we're going to go into it. This is what's going to happen to the money. All we knew is a new league was going to be formed with 20 clubs, 6 from England, and each club were going to get £3 million from.
But Dave, but the other thing, Dave, was absolutely crucial to this. And if clubs want to break away and want to play outside, as it were, the regulation of football, world football.
They didn't say that, Richard.
No, hang on. Wait a minute. What they did say, there is no promotion or regulation.
Relegation, I understand.
That is absolutely fundamental. That was at the heart of the Arnault report. In fact, at the beginning, the very opening paragraph of the Arnault report says the difference between the type of structure that you've got in the US and what we have in, not just for football, but for sport generally, across Europe, is the pyramid structure. They were threatening, they wanted to bring into football, into European football, a structure that would have undermined the very structure that we take from top to bottom for 2 million kids who are kicking a ball around in a park, and what we have been able to do in terms of that redistribution of money to put all the 3G pitches in, to start developing women's football, to start developing the whole structure of football, they were prepared to put that on the chopping block for greed. Now,
that's not true. That is not true.
You tell me the difference.
In this country, we're going to allow anybody to infiltrate or destroy the pyramid of football. And there's been nobody worked harder than you putting money into thing. At times, you bled me dry. You made sure that the pyramid of football were looked after. And we did, Rich. And nobody
I have
will
no
ever
problem
break
with that.
that up.
Answer the central question. Dave, how do you control 14 clubs, the biggest in Europe, who are walking away and are saying this is what they said. The one thing factually we do know about the European Super League, that it was going to be a closed system.
I agree
No
with
regulation. And that goes to the very heart of the structure of sport and football in particular in Europe. The Arno report, read the Arno report, that set off and it said, you read.
Richard loves the Arno report and
but the Lord Burns report.
They did make a mistake in saying there were no relegation.
Dave, a mistake?
It's a major mistake, and they made it. But Richard, it was
Further, Dave, because the reason they were able, those 6 clubs were able to make that type of statement that they could run the closed system is because they had been privileged in our country to run a cartel that had raised huge amounts of money, television money. A lot of that's not even fans' money is important, but the television money that they actually generated, both international and national, put them into a position where they were going to abuse that, absolutely abuse it, and actually break down the football because we'd allowed them unregulated to run a cartel.
I don't think I would like to intervene here because I don't think that, although I'm not an English national, I don't think that is the word. I don't think that the way the Premier League operates can be labeled as an unregulated cartel. And we already had this conversation.
No, I didn't say that. No, all due respect.
And the collective selling is unregulated. I think it's one of the most regulated sectors in the world.
All due respect, Emmanuel, when I sat down with Nelly Kroes as the European Commissioner for Competition in 2005-06, and we were arguing about collective selling, she said, and proved it with unreasonable doubt, that collective selling of 20 clubs' television rights was in itself a cartel. Now, you tell me where that's not because if it is a cartel, that is an unregulated cartel as well.
No, I disagree.
Where is the regulation?
I disagree, but more important than the semantics and the legal jargon, it's this. It could be theoretically a restrictive practice of competition, but it is within the boundaries and within the Treaty of the European Union because it is central. The commercialization is centralized, yes, but it has financial solidarity. The revenues are distributed in an equitable, proportionate, and adequate manner by all clubs, all those 20 clubs, plus there is also vertical solidarity to non-Premier League clubs. Now you tell me, how can sport be successful and be a shining example of a successful business sector, almost self-sustained in some countries, if it was not for central selling? Central selling is the bedrock of the commercial success of sport, not just in Europe, but in the world, provided it is done properly with the generate income streams that are reinvested back into the game from organization of competition, tournaments, youth development, community projects, social responsibility. And we have, excuse me, Richard, let me just finish for the sake of coherence of my explanation. The past year, we have gone through a living hell with this global pandemic. Have you seen the expression of solidarity from the world of football?
Yes.
That too has to be acknowledged.
Fantastic.
It's not just to always to mention about the money has football live at the expense of governments.
You're not defending the ESL.
I'm not defending
the ESL.
I am not defending the European Super League. Of course not. I was the first to criticize.
Well, fine. Let's talk about
like
them,
I did in 2000, like I did in 2005, and like I did 4 years ago when UEFA was under the crisis, or 6 years ago when the UEFA was under the crisis of leadership, and the clubs got more power on the negotiation table, in detriment of the leagues. Perhaps the leagues also have a table, in detriment of the leagues. Perhaps the leagues also have reasons to analyze why clubs got so powerful and start dictating the rules of the game and negotiating with the gun on the table and threatening UEFA every 3-year cycle to get more and more money. But I'm glad that they did what they did, because now everyone knows where everyone stands. And the fans have expressed themselves, the sponsors have expressed themselves, and now we are left to 3 of those dirty dozen. We are left to 3 clubs that refuse to face the reality.
No,
But beyond that, but beyond that, the central selling of rights, provided it's done properly, and the Premier League has been an example of best practice in this sector, has been the best practice example in this sector.
Nobody better, Emmanuel.
And Dave deserves applaud for that more than anyone. So I refuse to agree that it is a non-regulated cartel.
I didn't say that. No, Emmanuel, I didn't say that it was unregulated. In that, I said the television selling rights is unregulated.
No, it's not. It is not. Excuse me, it is not. It is not. It is unregulated. You know why it is unregulated? In my country, for example, where shamefully we have a situation of individual selling of rights, where you have a de facto monopoly of 3 clubs that perpetuate themselves at the top of the ranking, because if they have more money, they have more successful on the sporting ground. Yeah. This is unregulated. This is unregulated. See what the Spanish League has done. The Spanish League has operated a true revolution with the central selling of rights, so that they could have more competitive balance, more uncertainty of results. And instead of having 2 giant clubs that rotate amongst themselves who lifts the trophy at the end of the season, they could have more. And we can analyze everything. We can even analyze the 50+1 model and whether this is the silver bullet. But I think we cannot throw the baby out of the window with the bathwater. There are things that must be addressed. Yes. Club ownership must be addressed. Absolutely. Start by assessing, overseeing, scrutinizing the credentials of those owners. Who are the ultimate beneficial owners? Where is the money coming from? Where are those investment funds based? Who is behind them? Ask governments.
Well,
why they're not walking the talk. Excuse me, Richard. Ask Nellie Cross if she will allow, in her report, if she will recommend to the British government that the British Virgin Islands and other offshores and other tax havens continue to operate. The Americans gave a very eloquent lesson now when, under our request and Transparency International and other organizations, they have legislated, the Congress, they have legislated to stop shell companies. Are we allowed these shell companies to continue to exert opaque influence in the world of football? I don't think we should. And someone has to have the courage to say that. Someone has to have the courage to say to OECD, enough talking, action is needed. Someone has to have the courage to say to the European Commission the same. And the governments. Stop acting like you are in elections every day, in the political campaign every day. We need reforms. Where are they? No wonder people are protesting in the streets, because they feel that there is no one listening to them.
Emmanuel, what reforms do you actually want?
What reforms do I actually want?
Just on it, sorry, just put across for a second.
Governance and integrity,
Emmanuel,
and they are all, sorry, they are all published. They are all published.
But also,
universal standards contain those reforms. But more than just those universal standards on good governance, on financial integrity, on youth development, on child protection, on sports betting integrity, I expect, I demand as a fan, and I am also a fan, I demand independent scrutiny and oversight. I demand that the sport movement exerts the leadership that it has and lives up to the expectations of all this global community. And now it's the time. If we don't want to see another breakaway league threat in a few years' time down the road.
Emmanuel touches on an important point there, I think, especially given that regulation is a word that's come up so much. But I suppose if you look at a driving factor of the Super League, ultimately it's because a group of owners, in this case, the owners of 3 clubs, basically see clubs as vehicles of perpetual growth. which I suppose is the Glazers, FSG, and also Kroenke at Arsenal. But I mean, in terms of what the possible regulation that Emmanuel is looking at, should clubs, and particularly clubs in England, given what we're talking about here, should clubs not be ring fenced as social institutions? Is that possible? And I mean, what could we put in place to try and get that?
They're private businesses, Miguel. They're privately owned businesses.
But I mean, structurally now, but in principle, and given the foundation of these clubs, they are community assets. They're social institutions.
Why do you say that? Why do you say they're a community asset when you find out that the Central League, the Premier League, takes that money and redistributes it all over the place? And the man sat there, Richard Caban, was a great ambassador for the redistribution of wealth. Now, we formed a company called the Football Foundation. And in our time, mine and Richard's, we put hundreds of millions into the pyramid. All came from the clubs, the FA. I honestly, I sometimes wonder, we've got private clubs, and Nelly Crowe hit it on the head when Richard said to me, Dave, the difference is, I said, Rich, they like Marks and Spencer's, these companies. They're privately owned companies. And Nelly Crowe said to him, but it's different because people pay to come in the clubs and they don't pay to go in Marks and Spencer's. And she really stood us back on her heels. And we worked through that, and it took a long time to get her to allow us to do the things. And from then, we started to regulate and discipline and run the clubs like they should be run. Now, because these people have come along and wanted a Super League, I don't think the Glazers had an awful lot to do. I don't think Stan Kroenke had an awful lot to do. I think they went to a couple of meetings and listened to what people said. It wasn't instigated by the Premier League. Tell me who instigated.
There are a lot of reports that it was specifically driven by Manchester United and Liverpool, and specifically the owners.
I don't believe that. I don't believe that, because the owners are not sufficiently involved in the clubs because they've got chairman and chief executives. Now, you might say that Ed Woodward had a lot of meetings, but you can't blame the Glazers for that. I mean, you know, they're the investors. They're the people that put the money in. I mean, Kroenke.
But in the case of the Glazers, the Manchester United fans would point out there's been very little money put in, and the issue has really been money.
That's not, Miguel. That's not true. Have a look at the balance sheets and everything. All right, they took a huge investment and they did it a way that they thought were fit. But Manchester United is a wonderful club. It's got wonderful supporters, and I don't think the answer is driving the owners out. Okay, you might want more discussion between fan bases and that, but all the clubs in England have these fan seminars where fans come and they sit with the chairman and he answers the questions to them.
But a key issue, just to take the example of Manchester United, a key issue has been the complete lack of communication between the ownership and hierarchy and the club. In fact, it was only in response to the protest of last week, the Glazers basically made I think it was only their second public comment in 16 years. I mean, are we really going to, I suppose a key question here, do you actually think the Glazers have been good owners for Manchester United?
I don't think they've done bad with what they've done.
But the club,
Manchester United, since they owned it, has always been in the top 3 or 4. Now, what do the fans want? They want to be in that. The fans, you know, they have a real responsibility and a real input into clubs, you know. But at the end of the day, the fans want to see a winning side. And you can't say Manchester United hasn't tried to reinvest and buy players and pay top salaries to compete in Europe. I think you've got to start and look why the Super League were talked about again. I think one of the questions you need to ask yourself is, how much were they trying to drain out of UEFA? What was happening behind the scenes with UEFA? What's happening behind the scenes with FIFA? You've got a World Cup. You've got a club championship, which they're talking about, a club cup. You've got UEFA with the Champions League. You know, they've got it embroidered, making it bigger. You need to look at the overall setup of football to understand what's really happening in this business.
Yeah, but I think also, Dave, that I mean, the central question I think we've got to ask is: are we going to allow whatever we say about the Premier League? And when I started this discussion off, I said that I believe that English football is in as good a state as it's been in for many, many years. And I'm talking about the whole pyramid there, because of the number of young people that's playing on 3G pitches, women's football, girls' football now integrated. The structure of football is a good. Could it improve? Obviously it can. We could do a lot more to improve it. And we could also improve the governance of the game as well. And I this is where I disagree with Emmanuel. What I said is that the redistribution within the game has allowed that to happen. There's no doubt that the Premier League's been highly successful. But what you've now got is 6 owners that have come in, and you can put whatever reason you want on it, Dave, and if we might know or not know. The one thing I do know is that they threatened the very structure of English football, that pyramid. That's what they did. And if they'd have took that big chunk of money away, that big chunk of income from television rights, as they were going to do, and they look what they that's
Can't
what
take it away, Richard.
well,
They
listen.
can't.
Well, okay. You might not think so.
I know
That's
so,
not-
Richard.
That's not
Because
my view.
I was there when we wrote all these rules.
But
And
look, Dave, you may
and
be.
Richard Scudamore protected the integrity of the game in the UK. What
Well,
we can't do is look at European clubs. Me and Emmanuel tried to solve that.
Yeah, you might have tried to, but all I'm saying on that Monday morning, that Sunday night, and that Monday morning, when people and saw what was available at that time, and they saw the structure that they were actually recommending, in fact, not recommending, we're going to carry out, that was alien to structures of sport, which we'd already addressed in the Arno reports from, 15 years ago. And we said that was a real danger. We addressed it in the Burns report on the restructuring of the FA to make sure that we had a governance that looked after the pyramid structure. Now, that was threatened. It was threatened because we in England had allowed 6 clubs to get into a powerful position that they were, to be able to be the heart of that European League. Now, I think that that's an issue, an English issue, because of the structure and the ownership that we have in England. It's not same in Spain, it's not same in Germany, it's not same in France, but allowed 6 of our clubs to become the heart and the driver of that ESL. And I think we in England have got to have a look at that, which the government's doing. And I think my view is that the government's saying, you better come out with a structure that's not going to allow that to happen, that is fair, that protects the pyramid system. And if you don't, then we're going to do it for you.
Okay.
And I think that's the choices now. And that's why the Crouch report or the Crouch inquiry that's going on, I think is very important. But I do accept what Emmanuel said. It also gives opportunities to see.
I would like to take your lead, Richard, and to say the following. If we want to have this discussion in 2, 3, 5, 10 years' time, exact same discussion, focusing on the exact same dramas, threats, and challenges, we have to do only one thing, is to continue the path, to continue to do exactly how and what has been done. Nothing will change, except things will get worse. Challenges will get bigger, more sophisticated, more complex. Governance that is already poor in many cases will get poorer, and losses will be accumulating. We need to understand this. We face global problems, global challenges, and global challenges call for global solutions and global approaches. It's not just England, it's not just Europe, it's the world, and the world of sport and the wider industry. For this, I would like to ask the production to put a slide that will explain this in 2 seconds. What we SIGA stand for, and what is our mission, our vision, and the proposals that we bring to the table, and the priorities. 4 core areas interlinked, from governance to financial integrity, sports betting integrity, youth development, and child protection, addressed in a collective, holistic fashion, with a standard, with a set of universal standards that are robust, fit for purpose. I dare to say they are the silver bullet. They address each and every problem, each and every issue, each and every concern that we have expressed in this discussion and in many others that I have watched and heard and read. These universal standards represent a unique opportunity for the world of sport to voluntarily take the leadership and once and for all reform itself. More than that, it represents an opportunity to justify and regain the trust from the fans, the global business community, from the governments. The independent rating system that we have exerted is public, transparent, and it is, with the partnership that we have with the British Standard Institution, impartial, independent, and objective. They show that organizations can be fit for purpose. And for those who invest their money and their trust and their passion on clubs, on leagues, on federations, on international organizations, who are accountable to their shareholders, they want to be certain that when they put their money, their reputation, they put on fit for purpose organizations. That independent rating system is therefore the silver bullet. And I want to encourage and invite with open arms all sports organizations, including FIFA, UEFA, the leagues, the clubs, to use them. You don't need to continue to chase the silver bullet or reinvent the wheel. They already exist. Make use of them. And let's move from intentions into actions and achievements. Why is it so difficult? Why can this not be done? That's what I ask, and that's what I expect.
Yeah, Emmanuel, you need to look at Europe more than you look at the UK, because the UK regulations are pretty good.
I'm not looking to the UK. I'm looking to the forest days.
Globally, but look at the countries that's causing the kind of problems that you're talking about.
Every country has issues. No one is immune.
Okay. Well, start looking at the regulation that we've got and start putting it in, and look how hard we worked at the European leagues to get that kind of regulation.
Yeah, exactly.
We could never get them to agree.
Is it? I mean, we're talking about stuff like pyramid, grassroots, redistribution. But if you actually stand back and look at what created the Super League, what created the Super League was basically that a handful of clubs, and this applies to England as well, 6 clubs were allowed to grow to a certain financial size that they occupied so much of the global football market that it almost made this idea inevitable. I mean, that feels like it's the fundamental problem. And that comes from a lack of regulation in England as well. That there wasn't sufficient redistribution to allow that it created almost these Frankenstein clubs.
No.
And can I say one other issue, which I found when we were bidding for the World Cup? There is a grievance internationally against the Premier League. Now, I'll defend the Premier League. I think the Premier League, in terms of properly controlled, as I've said, is the right way to go, and I've defended that. But I can tell you this, that what many are saying in the international world of football is saying England sucks all the players into England. We put them into teams, probably some of the best in the world, and I think we've seen that in Europe now at the moment. They then sell them back to those countries, and particularly in areas of Africa and Brazil and around the world. We then take the television revenues of those games and bring it back into England again. And so what we do is we're taking the best of the players from the world out of those countries, bringing them and playing them in England. We then package them, sell them back in television rights, and take the television money out. Now, okay, there could well be an argument for some redistribution there, and that's the role of the marketplace. But I tell you what, in the world of football out there, It's rather antagonistic from their point of view of what England is doing in terms of the Premier League.
Richard, I could put another slant on that. You say we take all the best players around the world. That might be possible. They come to England, they train well, and then we release them to go back to their countries and play for the national teams to beat England. Yeah. What about that?
Well, that's another argument, Dave.
Well, it happens. It happens. And after a period of time, they move back into Europe because they've learned so much here, and it's happening.
Yeah,
and you can't say that the Big Six have always been the Big Six. Take Leicester City. What a phenomenal rise. Now, they are getting a reasonable amount, but the distribution in the Premier League doesn't give the Big Six that big break to do what they're doing with the Super League. Distribution is fairly fair.
I think it is fair. And I would like to say something else. I would like to say the following. This European Super League would be the death of football as we know it. A football that rewards sporting merit, a football that gives a chance to the little ones to, through sporting merit, go up the ladder and lift the trophy. It would kill the European sports model and its values. And more importantly, it would kill the integrity of the game as we know it. You know, because it's pure greed. And this is very important. You know why? Because we are all suffering the damages, the unspeakable damages that this global pandemic has caused. And I'm not just talking about human lives. I'm talking about the destruction of the economy, the destruction of jobs, the destruction of hopes and dreams and the future that is in great distress. The motto of the current period, you know what it is? Recovery with integrity. It's not recovery with money. It's not recovery with entertainment. No, it is recovery with integrity. And this is the reason why integrity must be put at the top of everything that we do. We live in a different world. It's a new generation. And values speak louder than the commercial success. And they should be, because that's the right thing to do. So I appeal to all those who have responsibility, not just in football, but in all sports, from the IOC to the smallest, to the tiniest sports organization, to raise this culture of integrity at the top, because now it is the moment. Now it is the moment.
Just to move the discussion on slightly, because I think it's important, and it's amazing we're actually still on the first question, but this is probably key to what next, which is, I suppose, not just how you punish the Super League clubs, but how you deal with the issues that created the situation in the first place, how you placate some, how you create a deterrent. So do you want to go on that, Richard?
My view is that we've now got to go, and that's a challenge I think that the British government said in the review that it's got. We've got to make sure we can never stop clubs breaking away. If clubs want to break away and create a league, they've every right to do that. You know, in the freedom of the marketplace, they want to do that. What they can't do that is with the sanction of football. And so therefore, we've got to say very clearly in the football family and in the pyramid that we believe is the right way to develop our game and need sports generally as well, is we've got to make sure that that is secure and will not be undermined by clubs like the Six walking away from us. And if they did, then they'll walk away, but they don't do damage. So it is that I think that's important, that we need to look at enhancing that pyramid and also making it secure that this type of Trojan horse that could be brought in is not allowed to operate within it. And I think that's a whole series. The 8 points that have now been laid down for the Working Party will be addressing pretty well all those issues that you're talking about that would allow that to happen, to undermine the football. So if they want to break away, fine, they can break away, but they don't break away with the ability to actually undermine and destroy the very system of football we have in our country and indeed across Europe. That's the challenge.
Richard, are you under the impression the 6 clubs in England were going to break away from the Premier League?
No, they weren't going to break. They were going to create a league backed by major bankers in the world, as I understand it, that we're going to take huge amounts of money, which effectively are got to come from somewhere, and it's be out of football. And they were then going to create a structure that would not allow the Leicesters, which we've been talking about, and indeed other clubs, to be able to achieve the objectives that they have achieved. And also, to me, more importantly, is the kid who's kicking a ball in a schoolyard out there has got the aspirations to be, and the hope, really to go up that pyramid, as it were, and finish the top. The day we destroy that is the day that we destroy the game of football as we know it.
I don't believe the Big Six had any intentions of trying to ruin the Premier League on distribution because they wanted to continue to play in the Premier League. Okay, long term, the amount of money they've got could have made a difference. But they've then got to fight against UEFA. And then the fight starts with FIFA. That's a massive fight.
But could you honestly, Dave, could you imagine
the Premier League?
What you're saying now, honestly, Dave, do you think that is got the remotest chance of operating in that Premier League on the system that we're talking about, Premier League, and then go midweek and play something on a closed league? It's fantasy world. It's absolute fantasy world.
Dick,
they didn't mean that. These are hard-headed business people. They'd worked out if they could have got away with it, they would have had a cash cow for a period of time, and that would have destroyed many of the structures that we've got in Europe.
So you think the 6 clubs could afford to throw away the 150 million plus?
In terms of what I saw in the answer that is yes.
Well, don't you think a bit of that's pie in sky, Rich?
I do, absolutely. But they did it, and all I know is on my watch we had to deal with that in a lesser form. But there were 14 clubs that wanted to break away in Europe in 2005, and we dealt with it.
My friends, I would like, if you give me the opportunity, to answer the direct question that Miguel raised with a direct answer. You asked Miguel what we would do moving forward. I will tell you what I will do. I will, from this day on, representing the global community that SIGA stands for, and the vision and the mission that we pursue, with the legitimacy that is conferred to us by all our membership and supporters base, I will speak to the president of UEFA, the president of the ECA, the president of FIFPro, the president of the European leagues. I will speak with all ministers of sport of the European Union. I will speak with the major sponsors, the major broadcasters, and of course, not forgetting the Federation of Supporters in Europe. SIGA will not cease, will not spare any effort until we seize this opportunity to instigate cultural change and impel true reforms. And I will be accountable for these actions. And I will announce the result of every meeting that I have, whether the door is open or closed, whether it is a yes or no at the end. With the same transparency that I'm announcing this, I will also be responsible for the results. If the global sporting community means business, if the global leaders of our time in sport and in government believe that it's time to move from sound bites into actions and results, we shall know, because the time for truth has arrived. And I think I speak on behalf of those who protest in the streets, those who buy their tickets, those who invest their money, those expectations, their passion in sport, those who bring their kids on weekends to the football grounds, those who carry their team shirts. those who work in a sector that wants and want it to be treated and regarded with dignity, those who want football to be seen and regarded for what happens on the pitch and not off the pitch. Speaking on behalf of all those, if they allow me, I will do my best. And I know that that Dave and Richard will come along, because this is not a task for one single man. This is a task for all like-minded individuals, all like-minded organizations. And I believe that also the media has an invaluable role to play, not just as a bystander or just as to report the facts, but to influence and to instigate this long overdue cultural change and the reform that sport needs for a long, long time.
We're coming to the last
promise. That's what I promise, and you can be sure that I will deliver.
We're coming to the last 5 minutes. I suppose, given how much debate each question has caused, I might kind of finish up with kind of a last open one. You've all been in the game or around the game and worked on it for years. From all your experience and expertise, what do you see as the next steps in this story? I suppose we'll start with Sir David.
I think that football just needs to settle down. It needs to start to kick off. It needs the fans back in the ground. And then I think, like Emmanuel, we've got to try and get him in to see all these clubs at one go. Like I will endeavour to get him in to see the chairman and the chief executive of the Premier League to talk to him about the future. But I'm pretty confident that the English Premier League and the pyramid structure will stay. I don't think the Super League will go away. I think there are people out in Europe who need it more than the Premier League need it.
What about yourself, Richard?
I think it's building from the bottom up. I think, and I think the review that's been put in place because of the pressure from the fans, and not just the fans, but football generally. It was really, I've never seen anything like it in England, and to some extent across the UK, where there was an uprising and it brought all parties together to say, we're not having this. We're not having our national game, as it were, challenged in the way that it was. So I just think we have to build. And as I say, I think English football, the pandemic aside, when I'm talking about the grassroots, women's and girls football, and the health of football and the redistribution within it, is as good as any, and I think can be better. So we want to build on what happened in 2005-06 with the Burns report, which was a structural review of the FA. I think we need to revisit that and modernise the governance of football. And I think we need to bring in stronger regulation through a licensing system. But absolutely central is that that's within football. My view is politicians should support sport. They shouldn't be leading on sport. And I think that is the key to the architecture that we need to have for good quality, transparent running of football, which will benefit everybody through that pyramid. Now, if we can build that, and we can have our links, which we will do with UEFA and with FIFA particularly, then I hope we can influence others to actually look at that and build it, as it were, from the bottom up. And I think there's an appetite for that, quite honestly. And I think it's taking all the football family with us and saying, for those who want to, as it were, exploit it through greed or whatever it is, I'm sorry, you've got no part of this game. And that will be and in that, I think the 8 points or so that has been put down by the government need answering, and I'm hoping football will respond to that challenge.
And it was
part of the story, as far as the European Super League is concerned, is simply to address the pending questions. UEFA will address it, the leagues will address it, the clubs will extract lessons. I think that is obvious, but I want them to look beyond the European Super League and the mere competition sporting aspects. There are structural issues that must be addressed. There are integrity issues that must be addressed. There are governance concerns that must be addressed. And this is a unique opportunity. And this is why the title of this program is, there is no such thing as a crisis. The crisis is just the beginning of a myriad of opportunities to reform, to transform, and to excel. Renaissance would have not been Renaissance without the Middle Age. So let's take lessons, let's take this opportunity and reform and progress. But I would like to end with a positive note. And of course, I would not mention the progress that SIGA is making in so many fronts, including in youth engagement in terms of female leadership, gender equality, because all those facts are real and they are known. But I will say the following. The G20, the grouping of the leading 20 countries in the world, has announced for this year 3 main priorities. One of them, for the first time ever, is anti-corruption and sport. That is a major, major shift, a major step forward. If we had not believed in our proposals, if we have not believed in what we say in ourselves, the G20 would never have come to this conclusion. So we will insist, we will persevere, we will continue to do our job with a positive message, with a constructive tone, naming and faming rather than naming and shaming, seeking allies, seeking like-minded organizations, and in the spirit of cornership and of partnership, try to advance. For Christ's sake, it is time to do something about these problems rather than just complaining and bickering and throwing this to the next generation to solve. I believe we can do this. And I hope that you believe as well, because I will need you.
Well, a good positive note to end on what was a very a fiery but hopefully productive 70 minutes. Thanks everyone for your contributions. And,
cheers, well done to you as well.
Well done.
Yeah, cheers.
Yeah, I was missing.